In a remote corner of the great Atlantic Ocean, there is a place which, since its creation, was like a Garden of Eden. But 500 years ago, that was all to change. After nearly a month at sea, an English ship named the Matthew, searching for a route to the Far East, arrived instead at this mystical place off the coast of North America. John Cabot, the ship's captain, christened it Newfoundland. He described a sea so thick with codfish that they slowed the progress of his ship. Little did he know it, but Cabot had discovered the richest northern waters on Earth. Following Cabot's discovery, generations of us settled here to make a living from the ocean and its wildlife. Through time and endurance, we came to love this place we now call home. And we became people of the sea. In Newfoundland, we have an ancestral bond with the sea and its wildlife. A bond which has shaped our very livelihood and culture. And when you're born and raised here, the sea becomes something more than just a physical presence. Something deep and spiritual that goes down deep inside you. It becomes part of your soul, part of your heart. Something that's always with you. It was on these islands here, a number of years ago, that I began studies of this system. Studies that were to convince me forevermore just how delicate the balance in this ocean environment really is. It's difficult now to grasp the incredible diversity, the richness of what this system was like when European man came here approximately 500 years ago. I can only imagine this amazing profusion of life. Seabirds swarming in their multitudes, feasting upon the vast shoals of fish which once teemed here, and flotillas of whales, so numerous as to be described by early sea captains as the greatest threat to navigation in these waters. But why did we inherit such riches? What makes these waters of ours so unique? Some of the answers lie inland. Compared to the sea, parts of the interior of Newfoundland are so harsh we sometimes call it the rock. Animals do survive here now, but as little as 10,000 years ago, huge glaciers scoured the land to bedrock. Great sheets of ice, a mile deep, carried valuable soil and minerals down into the coastal waters. These nutrients fertilized a large area of submerged land, known as the Grand Banks. Lying on the western edge of the Great Atlantic, we are bathed in the rich turbulence of two colliding ocean currents, the warm Gulf Stream flowing north and the cold Labrador Current pushing south. The currents and minerals mix right here, nourishing an abundance of plankton, the key link upon which everything else depends, creating an undersea paradise. Plankton flourish in the summer sunshine, filling our coastal waters with a pulse of new life. For many creatures, they're a rich source of food, especially for these small silver fish, which year after year move inshore from the deep Atlantic by the million. They are called capelin. It is awesome to watch these tiny fish sweep towards our coast, blackening our bays with their sheer abundance. Capelin are the most important prey for all marine life here, and they're absolutely critical for one particular hunter, the northern codfish. In the past, cod were so plentiful that they could be caught by dipping baskets over the sides of ships, or even by dogs leaping from the shore. Spawning on the shallow Grand Banks and in our many bays, cod once existed in schools that were literally 5 miles wide and more. We swam in a sea of fish. But cod have a fatal attraction. Firm white flesh, free of oil and bones. To man, they were irresistible. At first, we had little impact on the stocks. Our methods were simple and we were confined to the summer season. For my ancestors from Ireland, England and France, who fished the inshore waters, it was a hard but rewarding life. There seemed no limit to what the ocean could provide. Fishing was the gateway to the settlement of Canada, and we fed the markets of Europe with salt cod, dried upon racks and rooftops. Cod was our currency, our culture, and our pride. Through the 1950s, technology rapidly advanced, and our fishing efforts increased. In some years, we caught over 1 million tons of cod, even though we were limited by the frozen seas of winter. But the international fleets of factory ships could work year-round and target precisely the concentrations of fish. By 1977, stocks were in serious decline, so Canada banned foreign ships from these waters. But then, incredibly, we ourselves ruthlessly pursued cod to the very brink of extinction. While larger vessels plundered the offshore waters, our small boat fishermen were catching little and warned of disaster. They were largely ignored. Only when it was too late, when it no longer made economic sense to fish, did the government take decisive action. In 1992, they banned cod fishing.
To safeguard the northern cod as a species, I've decided that effective at midnight tonight, there will be a moratorium on harvesting of northern cod. And all this will affect about 20,000 fishermen and plant workers.
With this one devastating announcement, almost 500 years of cultural tradition was halted. It seemed inconceivable we had decimated the once endless stocks of cod. But we had. We blamed scientists, we blamed foreigners, we blamed politicians. But ultimately, we had to blame ourselves. To add to our despair, we had no idea if the cod would ever return. And some described it as the blackest day in our history. But out of our grief emerged a stubborn hope. Although the cod were at the point of commercial extinction, the secret for their recovery, their food supply, was still very much alive. Just once a year, for a few precious days, vast shoals of capelin emerged from the deep and raced towards our beaches. Driven by the urge to spawn, wave upon wave of capelin throw themselves ashore. Capelin live for 4 years, but this only happens once in their lifetimes. Males and females unite, casting sperm and eggs into the fine sand. But amidst this beauty, this great celebration of life, there is also death. Ospreys are among the many migrants that come here each summer and fish for capelin. Beyond the shore, the capelin face an even greater threat. Humpback whales, 5,000 of them, travel here from the Caribbean for their one big feast of the year. The whales cooperate in herding capelin using a curtain of bubbles. For such huge animals, it's a delicate maneuver. From all directions, these small fish face attack. Gannets fly underwater in pursuit of capelin, transformed from ghost-like figures to a shower of white arrows. Capeland season is a brief but magical time. I see it as a hinge upon which swings the entire rhythm of life, both of man and all other hunters of the sea. Deprived of scraps from fishing boats, gulls now rely more heavily on Capeland for survival. But as quickly as this feast comes to our shores, it is over. Most Capeland die after spawning, but each female leaves behind more than 20,000 eggs. In the great cycle of nature, even the dead Capeland refertilize the ocean, giving life to others, like the sculpin. Flatfish too scavenge the dead, but they must be wary. In Newfoundland, ospreys are known for good reason as fishhawks. The sea provides enough food for them to raise a family inland, where taller trees provide firm support for their huge nest of sticks. Like many of the birds that depend on the sea, the osprey's breeding season coincides with that of Capeland, when the ocean is at its richest. Such timing is critical to the survival of chicks. On land, we can easily see what an animal needs to survive, and the danger signs if it is threatened. But under the waves, there is so little we really understand. What we have recently learned is that the ocean is far more fragile than we ever imagined. Of course, we've always known that the eggs left by the Capeland on our beaches are nurtured by the tides, and now, after 3 weeks, they're ready to hatch. Unable to fend for themselves, the young Capeland are at the mercy of predators and ocean currents as they drift in the world of the plankton. But we now know that they face an even bigger threat, a recent drop in sea temperature. Currents from the north are bringing greater amounts of Arctic water to our coast. Very cold water can affect Capeland growth and survival, and fewer Capeland could spell disaster for those that rely on them, especially seabirds. This is Funk Island, 40 miles offshore, home to nearly 1 million murres. Each year, a colleague and friend of mine, Professor Bill Montevecchi, comes here to study the delicate balance between the birds, the fish, and the sea.
I've been fortunate to be coming here to Funk Island for about 20 years, and I've sampled fish from the seabirds that they bring back to their chicks. And I used that information to try and get information about the fishery. What I've noticed recently is that the diets of the birds have shifted from warm water species like mackerel and squid to colder water species like capelin and herring. I've seen that change during the 1990s when we've had anomalously cold water events occurring in the Northwest Atlantic.
This has serious implications. With a greater demand for capelin and the threat of colder seas, these fish are under more pressure than ever before. But now, as autumn nears, those few capelin that survive the rigors of spawning and the many predators move into the deep. The coastal waters gradually drain of life. As winter takes hold, the face of the great Atlantic changes, bringing us, and cod and capelin, a new and controversial challenge: seals. For a few brief weeks, the sea ice around our shores becomes a nursery for literally millions of them. Hooded seals are capelin eaters, but they come here not to feed, but to give birth. The mother's milk is so rich from the season's fishing that she only needs suckle her pup for 4 days, the shortest period of any mammal on Earth. The mother will soon be ready to breed again, but not quite yet. And the males have a remarkable way of showing off. Another male, also keen on the female, answers the challenge. Nose-blowing is used to intimidate rivals. But in this case, it's a red rag to a bull. We know precious little about these weird and wonderful seals, but there's another we're much more familiar with: the harp seal. There are about 6 million of them, and their numbers are rising. Some fishermen see them as the greatest threat to the recovery of the cod. Traditionally, harp seals have been harvested for fur and food, and in 1996, about 250,000 seals were taken. Some people say this is far too few, but others feel killing seals, for any reason, is wrong. But how serious a threat are seals to cod? We've discovered that less than 6% of the harp seal diet is cod. They actually prefer capelin and other fish. Still, 6% of the diet of 6 million seals means they're eating an awful lot of cod. There are no easy solutions. And if we are to survive as a fishing nation, we better understand the ocean and its limitations. And what of the cod? Despite our worst fears of extinction, some did survive. Now it's essential we find out how well these precious remnants are doing, and that requires research. Fishermen like Tom Best are using their skills to find some answers.
The Sentinel Fisheries program that we're involved in is about gathering information about abundance, about the size of fish, the amount of fish in the system. We're looking at just about every factor that can impact whether a fish is available to inshore communities and when. And we're looking at whether the fish is healthy. So there's a lot of valuable information that's being gathered.
Tom and his crew are finding good signs of fish, particularly along our southern coast. But despite this optimism, it will be a slow recovery. In fact, so depleted are stocks that northern cod have just been placed on the world's red list for threatened species. Many people in the world are concerned for the fate of seals. But where is the outcry for cod? It's vital most of Tom's catch are set free. Although cod may be making a comeback, we're still some way from opening the fishery. And it's not just tough for us. The gulls that once thrived on scraps from boats are having to refine old tricks to secure a meal, especially before the capelin return to our shores. More than ever, gulls are directing their hunger at other seabirds, like murres. But it's not just eggs that are taken. A hungry gull isn't choosy. There's one creature that gulls really target. Puffins. Once trapped, the gulls try to drown the puffins. Many fall victim, but for others, the sea is their salvation. But each year, there's a time when gulls have less need for such prey. It is June, a time when fog sweeps in from the Atlantic, smothering our shores. In Newfoundland, we call this capelin weather. It is symbolic of good times to come. Again, our beaches are the target for a mass invasion. The capelin have returned, and they've been anticipated. Bald eagles are both hunters and scavengers. Shy and wary, they gather on remote beaches to fatten up on capelin. Bald eagles often scavenge leftovers from otters. Both species are uncommon, but at this time of year, with the capelin about, we have the rare privilege of seeing them together. It's tradition each summer for us to go down to the beach to collect capelin for food. While they may seem plentiful, I remember as a child we'd be up to our knees in them. But today, these precious fish are a shadow of their former selves, which is surprising with so few cod to prey on them. But like cod, capelin once took a hammering, victims of a fishery which harvested up to 500,000 tons a year for food and fertilizer. Such massive catches could not fail to affect these stocks. And today, many people feel the hardship of unemployment and are left to ponder an uncertain future. Our history was founded on cod, but indirectly it was because of capelin, the lifeblood of the ocean, that we were blessed with such riches. We've been so focused on cod that we've taken capelin for granted for far too long. Now, more than ever, we're realizing we need to understand the life of this little fish. Each summer, our scientists from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans try to estimate capelin numbers from the air. Usually the schools are so thick that they can be seen with the naked eye, but to get accurate information, the team is helped by computer imagery. Despite this technology, today's research program is reduced and only has the budget to check a few of our many bays. But surely, shouldn't we, at this time, be striving to increase our knowledge? At least scientists are trying to discover how many eggs are hatching from the beach, and in the light of changing sea temperatures, how many eggs the females are carrying. All this information is passed to the Canadian government. But do we now know enough to make the best decisions?
Another one from DFO advising that the fixed-gear capelin fishery in Placentia Bay will open at 6 o'clock Wednesday morning. That's tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. DFO again advising that the
In 1996, the government surprised many of us by reopening the capelin fishery, setting a quota of 40,000 tons. As they near the end of a long migration to our beaches, the little capelin are guided into the traps by huge walls of mesh. Given the vital role capelin play in sustaining all marine wildlife, we must question whether there should be a capelin fishery at all. And given the imperiled state of our cod stocks, shouldn't we be protecting capelin? And yet look at what we do with this sacred link. The capelin are caught before they've even had a chance to spawn, reducing their numbers at a time when we can least afford it. Many people, even many fishermen, feel outraged that we are taking the lifeblood from the ocean. Some would say it's economic madness. But there's work for everyone. And if only for a few days, there's a lot of money to be made. In communities hit hard by unemployment, few of us can afford to miss this opportunity. The capeliners search for pregnant females of just the right size. Only these fish are desirable as Japanese bar snacks. The pregnant females, the future of this species, are exported. The rest, many tons of them, are simply dumped. I find it unbelievable that we allow such horrendous activities to take place, such wastage. We know we cannot carry on like this. If we do, we can be guaranteed of one thing: an ocean devoid of life. Even today, our bays are littered with a graphic reminder of past excesses. The bones of the whales we once slaughtered. And when we deplete, we do so at great risk to ourselves. Many of our communities, built on the takings from the ocean, are now abandoned. So what does the future hold? Can we find a new attitude, a harmony between people and the sea? Well, I believe there is hope. There's hope for two reasons. One is the incredible resilience of nature. The other is the incredible spirit of man. Across Newfoundland, people like Gerald Smith are finding a new approach to wildlife.
I was a whaler from '68 until 1972 when the whaling was closed. We had two small whalers right into the bay taking minke whales, and we had two more whalers outside taking the finback whales. I felt like I had to do something else. Taking whales, it was a way to go. But now to see people so excited about actually taking pictures of those whales, and nobody getting harmed, the people are not getting harmed, the whales are not getting harmed, and everybody are happy, I think it's magnificent. I'm really proud, and I think the people that's looking at them are really proud too.
Today, ecotourism is drawing people from all over the world, and that's a positive move for both the economy and the wildlife. It's not just whales that are now thriving. Bald eagles were once extremely rare, but today numbers have climbed to over 400 pairs. It's people like Harry Brown who have given them help. Once a cod fisherman, Harry now makes a living from lobster. Each day he feeds the eagles with any fish caught in his traps. The reopening of our cod fishery remains uncertain, but we have patience and hope. And though everyone understands that if the fishery returns, it must be practiced with great caution, my fear is that, like nations worldwide, we'll return to our old, destructive ways. Today, many of our teenagers must leave to find work in mainland Canada, taking with them our youth and vitality. But for these children, there's still a chance they may be able to follow in the footsteps of their fathers and make a living from the sea. 1997 is our 500th year since Cabot's arrival, and we look with some regret to the past, but with great hope for the future. The same determination that saw us make a life in this harsh land will, if we are careful, bring back our dream, an ocean filled with fish. And our dream may come true. For while after 5 years without cod fishing, much of the ocean still remains empty, some of our bays are alive with young cod. These 5 years have also given us the rare gift of time. Time to ponder a new relationship, where people are not the masters of nature, but live in harmony with it. And time to realize that the future of cod, and the future for us, the whales and seabirds, depends heavily upon this little silver fish. If we can safeguard Capeland, then we have the foundations for an ocean as magical as it was 500 years ago. Throughout our history in Newfoundland, we've given many things to the world. But I think the greatest gift we can now give is a lesson in how not to treat natural resources. Like people everywhere, we were just trying to make a living. But now we're suffering the consequences of our mistakes. We hope the world will learn from our sacrifice.